Hi, everyone. A very warm welcome to another inspiring interview. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Grace Clayton. Hi, Grace, who is joining me from States. Grace is a leadership consultant at the Conscious Leadership Group and has a vast experience in coaching and teaching and facilitating the groups that are all focused on talking about conscious leadership. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. I'm very, very excited. I have got the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership book in here. This is the framework that Grace and all her colleagues and teams are using, basically. And I love this book. Grace, I have to tell you, I absolutely love this book. I keep coming back to it. And so I'm so excited for having you here. And thank you so very much for your time. I know how busy you are, so welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you, Michaela.
Thank you. Well, I will just go straight into it because just before we started recording, we said we have to go straight into it because there is a lot that we want to cover. And I will ask you straight away, can you just explain to our audience, what does it mean? What kind of framework do you teach when we talk about conscious leadership in the way that you teach it, that you understand it, and then you're coaching around?
Yeah, I would say one of the primary underlining pieces is we have this big distinction between content and context. And that's very different from a lot of coaching that's happening in the business world, where a lot of people focus quite a bit on the content. And the content is the details, it's the people, it's a situation, it's all that's happening. And of course, that's important. But if people aren't aware of how they are being, which is their context, in relationship to those situations. So if they're coming from a place of defensiveness, or they're coming from a place of blame, or they are not wanting to take responsibility, all of that is going to influence the way they deal with the content. And so rather than just going and working on content, we put a big amount of focus on helping people identify, where are they, like where are they coming from, what's their perspective when they're dealing with the content, and not until that person has more awareness of the situation, of how it is that they may be creating the problems in the first place, what it is they might be doing to contribute to the whole thing, do we then start going into working with content. So I'd say that's one of the biggest pieces. And I know there's more that you and I will talk about. But that's a good start.
Thank you. Yeah, and you have mentioned a couple of words, I think, quite important, obviously content and context, but also as you spoke, you mentioned two words, and that is self-awareness, which is huge when we talk about being conscious leader, or being conscious as a human being, basically. And also talking about being, because we very often talk about doing, and how much do we do and what do we do to become the great leader, but here we particularly talk about our state of being. So could you maybe touch on that a little bit, around the self-awareness and the state of being, so that people understand what do we mean?
Well, one of the things I like to say is we do work both inwardly, so we're helping people become more self-aware, like because if people don't have a sense of themselves, then they won't know how they're impacting other people. So the first part is really just getting people to get to know themselves. Like, what does it feel like when they are reactive? What does it feel like when they're defending? What are the states? What does their body feel like when they get scared? And to be able to recognize and identify that, and just make that not a big deal. Like, it's okay, everybody gets scared. It's okay, everybody goes through times when they have no idea what to do. And so we help people just be able to recognize, learn what their particular styles of when they get stuck are, because everybody has a style. They either go into more blame, or they go into more trying to fix the situation, heroing, or they go into more victimhood. So we help them to know themselves more. And then the second part is how am I impacting, and how am I communicating? How's that being received by the other people? And the being part you talked about is just we often, if I'm working with a leader for any length of time, I will have them start some kind of a meditation practice or a presencing practice, I call it.
Yeah.
It could be anything at all, but just so that they start to have some sense of what it is to not just always be in that forward momentum, because leaders can get so busy and so caught up with productivity and efficiency and all of these things. And if that is not balanced by a sense of also just being able to sit and be curious and open and wonder about things, then people will be often ahead of themselves. They're going to be in a momentum, and they may make decisions that they wouldn't have made if they had had some time just being with it and being able to relax into it, and then make a decision from that place.
Yeah, it's a huge distinction, and it's a huge amount of self-awareness. And really, once people, my clients as well, when I work with them, once they start realizing that state of being and the presence, and they're really feeling into how do I feel at this moment, is just such a huge revelation for many clients that previously did not take an opportunity to stop and reflect. And it just makes such a huge difference once clients start practicing it. It just clicks very quickly, and it's just beautiful to see that shift that happens in the way how they respond to the situations.
Yes, and one of the ways we do that, like you and I could do it even right now, one of the ways we do that is we teach people how to check in unarguably. And so what that looks like is first noticing what body sensation they're aware of. And sometimes there's several body sensations, like, might have a swirling stomach, might have a tight chest, might have, a pulling in their shoulders. So we teach them first to notice, what are the sensations? Second thing they notice is, what emotion am I experiencing right now? And we really hone those down to just very specific emotions: fear, anger, joy, creative energy, and sadness. And people, go, which one of those am I most feeling in this moment? No problem if you're feeling anger. No problem if you're feeling fear. No problem if you're feeling sadness, whatever. And then the third thing is just noticing what is the thought that's crossing my mind in this moment. So if I were to demonstrate that right now, I'm aware of kind of a warmth in my belly area, a little bit of a swirling around my middle of my chest. I notice a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiousness, and also joy is here. And the next thought I'm having is, I really, really love the transition of seasons into fall. So now you can go. So you can just say whatever body sensation.
Yeah. So I'm feeling actually my cells like dancing because I'm standing in my legs, so as I'm actually here, and as well feeling warmth here, and a little bit of that anxiousness because we are recording, obviously it always comes a little bit of that, but also an excitement over having this opportunity to talk to you about conscious leadership, and just being really grateful. So yeah, kind of a dancing energy, which is both a little bit of an anxiousness and an excitement at the same time.
Beautiful. So what we just practice is often what I will tell people how to start their meetings. I will say, go ahead and start your meetings with this little tiny practice where every person just gets to name what's happening. And what that helps do is it creates a little connection between people, because it's like, oh, that's how you're feeling. Oh, and that's the emotion that's here. Oh, okay, I can feel you. And then when you describe yourself to somebody, there's sort of a natural intimacy that starts to happen. Yeah.
Connection.
And people get more grounded too, because now they're not talking on top of an experience that they're not naming. And sometimes just naming it helps people relax. Like even if they come into a meeting frazzled, but they start off by saying, I notice I'm feeling frazzled. Now they take a breath, and often the frazzledness starts to settle down.
Yeah. Breath is the most beautiful anchor, isn't it? Always.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for that unexpected practical exercise straight away. We got more grounded now, so that's nice. So I'll move forward and just ask you about the 4 ways that are described in the book or in the framework of how we lead. So could you share with us what those 4 ways of leading are?
Oops. Yes. So the 4 ways of leading are to me, by me, through me, and as me. So to me is how quite a lot of the world operates. And when I'm in the to me state, I see myself as being at the effect of the world, or at the effect of a situation, or at the effect of another person. So, and it feels like life is happening to me. I'm just sitting here and life keeps happening to me. And there's a natural sort of a powerlessness, a victimhood that comes with that state. When we start to move into by me, we start to recognize that we're co-creators and that we're actually helping make the movie up. It's not just a movie that's operating without us. It's a movie that's influenced by us. And we start to, this is where primarily I work with people. So I will help leaders start to recognize when they're into me and give them tools to be able to move into by me. So now we're creating, we're starting to take responsibility. We are starting to ask ourselves lots of curious questions, like, what is it that I do want to create? If I'm not liking the results the way they are, what is it that I do want? And they get much more proactive and collaborative with life and with the people around them, and start taking responsibility. And that's primarily, I would say, where we work. Then there's a state of through me, which is, and all of us have had moments in this state. It's a state where we're not really thinking so much, and we just are allowing things to come through us. So, you know, we may be in front of a group of people giving a talk or leading a team, and rather than having everything planned about what's going to happen, we just get open, we get present, and we allow the impulses, the following the threads and the creative ideas and things to start to move through us. And so you could relate to this, like when you say something, you're in a conversation and you say something to somebody and you go, I've never articulated that before. I've never said that. There was a through me-ness that was starting to happen. And even you got surprised by what it is you said. And that's really fun. That's a fun state. I really enjoy that quite a bit. Like, it's sort of like getting out of the way, getting the ego out of the way, so that some of the other more creative, intuitive impulses might show up. And then the last stage is as me. And this is not a stage that many people actually are in. It's more of a, you know, this is when you see a pretty realized being and they've gotten into a state where they just pretty much live in presence. They don't really go in and out of presence. They don't go below the line and in defensiveness. They pretty much just live in a state of openness and curiosity. These would be, you know, more of the master, you know, sage teachers that you may have had an opportunity to be with. And occasionally we all hit those, of course. And this is not a progressive state. It doesn't go to me, to by me, to through me, to as me. It's not linear. We bounce around in these states. And but I would say that the majority of people, especially when they are starting to want to learn conscious work and start to bring it into their organizations, are making that move between to me to by me. And that's a very, very important stage. It's a beautiful stage. It's where we really start to feel empowered and that we start to feel like we have the ability and the skills to be able to create the things that we most want and to really learn from life. We start to see life as really much more of a learning opportunity rather than just a goal to be achieved.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for clarifying that. And we will go and talk about an example from leading, you know, life is happening to me and by me. As you said, that's the most important shift and also the most beautiful, because we're really going from being unconscious, running on the autopilot, to being conscious and taking responsibility. But you just mentioned something which we haven't mentioned at the beginning, and that is if somebody is below the line.
Yes.
And that is as well quite an important distinction within your framework, is when we are below the line and above the line. So could you maybe touch on that and just explain?
It's a very simple, involves a line, and the line distinguishes two states of consciousness. So below the line, we would say is a state where we are in some kind of fear or contraction. And so, you know, we may be feeling powerless in that place. Like, I just don't know what to do. We may be feeling defensive, like we need to defend our egos or we defend our position, and we're not really open to listening to other people. We may be feeling, as I mentioned, blaming. You know, we may be like, it's all your fault. And if you weren't doing this thing, you know, everything would be going okay over here. So all of these are different kinds of states we may have when we are in this below the line place. When we talk about above the line, we are in a state of curiosity. So we start to, you know, just like wonder about situations, especially when they're recurring. We start to think like, oh, okay, well, I've been here before. This is not my first time having this experience. Why might this be showing up again, or for the 5th time, or for the 20th time? We start to get open and curious. So there's this openness, a curiosity, and there's a genuine commitment to learning. We just get more interested. When we're below the line, we want to be right. We're just very attached to, I'm right, and you need to understand because you have to get where I'm at. And when we're above the line, we start to go, you know, I kind of think I'm right, but I might not be. And I'm really interested also to take in your perspective and to hear your thoughts and to understand where you're coming from. And so there starts to be this this feeling of, like I mentioned, like co-creating. And it's also this place where we are in trust. And we are trusting that life is actually here for us. It's here. It's providing us a chance to grow. It's providing us opportunities to have experiences. And instead of, when we're below the line, we're going to be afraid, you know, like the world may be a bad place and a scary place, and it's out to get us, and people are out to get us, and there may be more of that quality. Now, we can never control whether we go above or below the line, because we're just wired to look out for threats. That's just built into our system, and that's how we've survived as long as we have. But, and so we're never going to get to the point where we're going to live above the line. But what we do want to get to the point is where we can notice and recognize, am I above or below? That's the important part. It's way better to be able to go, I'm below the line, than to lie and say, oh, no, I'm open, I'm fine, everything's great, but you're really not. You're really closed and defensive. So I really like to tell leaders that it's not better to be above the line. It's just different. We're going to have a different experience when we're open than when we are constricted and in our fear. So we just want to have a lot of patience with ourselves. We want to be honest and give ourselves a chance to just, you know, bring compassion when we are below the line. And then we teach a lot of ways to be able to shift and get into that state of more openness. And the more you practice, the longer you can maintain your ability to stay there in curiosity.
It's all about practicing, isn't it? As you say, it's
So much.
more we get into it, and again, self-awareness kicks in. Or I am below the line at the moment. There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. But if we do realize and we just get present into that fact that we are below the line, then of course there is a much better chance for us to get out of that and consciously decide, what do I want to do about it, instead of just flowing with that autopilot. And that actually brings us really nicely into below the line, above the line, and moving from a leadership happening or life happening to me to by me. So could you just give our audience an example maybe of how does that shift looks like in a practical life, if you have anything from your clients or from the work that you do? So when the client shifts from life is happening to me to life is happening by me, what is it? How does it look like? If you just could give us an example. And I think can you hear me? We are having a Wi-Fi challenges in here today. It's very windy in the UK, but I hope you can hear.
I can hear you. Yes. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what that might look like. Now, granted that these examples come from leaders who've been doing this work for some years now, like several years. So they're very, very practiced, because the examples I'm going to give are kind of like a lot of people would be very, very reactive. So one was, I have a client who is owns a company, and he had a breach in his system, and there was a cyber attack. They got completely locked out of all of their data. Wow. They had no access to any of their records. This is a company of about 200 plus people, and they could not even pay their employees, because they even got locked out of like their ability to get to payroll. Now, they had a third-party IT person who was breached, and so they were the ones who had an ineffective system. Now, what most people would have done in that situation would be just to attack this third-party IT provider and blame them and get angry at them and tell them they needed to get their act together and fix it right away. But this leader did something very different. He decided that he was going to work with them, not blame them. He was going to collaborate with them. So what he did, instead of going into blame mode, he rallied his teams very quickly, and he said, okay, we're all going to work on this. We're going to learn from this. We're going to find out how this happened so that it doesn't happen again. And we're going to come up with creative solutions, and we're going to give them as many ideas as we can of how we can fix this, because of course they had all their internal systems and knew those. And so they did that rather than go into any blame. Now, did they feel blame at first? Of course they did. Of
just
course
a natural reaction, isn't it? It's straight away, the ego and your mind just goes. Yeah.
And it's like anytime you feel attacked, it's going to be natural to want to attack back, right? Even if it's not in the appropriate direction. So so they really used it that way. And they also went a step further. They told their employees, listen, if we can't access our database to be able to pay you, we're going to pay you in cash. Like 200 employees, they were going to pay cash their payroll. And so they really gained a lot of trust with their employees also, because they felt like they were going to be taken care of, and that people were taking responsibility for the situation, and they were being well handled. So overall, it ended up being an opportunity for everybody to stretch and grow and learn this new skill. And, these days, when I think about, the tensions that we have and the wars that we do have going on in our country, I think, well, wow, that's such a great microcosmic story of what we all really could learn if we all could think about helping collaborate together to find solutions rather than looking for who we can attack and blame. So this leader was he had to do a lot of work to be there. He had to keep on recommitting to being open and above the line, and recommitting to his curiosity and his learning. And then a different example I have a guy who is a co-founder, and he's got about three co-founders, 2 or 3 co-founders, and they started an organization together. And it all started off with this vision of how it was going to look, right? And who was going to do what and how it was going to play out. Well, very rarely does that happen. And sometimes I've worked with many co-founders, and there can be tension that arises when things start to change. Like one of the co-founder in this situation just found that a lot of the things he had originally thought he could commit to, he couldn't commit to, and his life was changing and schedule. And at first, the first reaction that my client had was like, oh my God, it's all going to fall apart. Like the whole company is going to go down because, we're not having this vision that we originally had. But he too has been practicing for quite some time, and he very quickly shifted from that fear place of what's going to happen to our company into, well, okay, maybe this is not what wants to happen. Maybe something else wants to happen. Maybe a different role wants to be formed for him. And maybe So he really started to take it all as, well, if it's not happening the way we think it should, then there is perhaps a better way that things do want to evolve. And that really helped him through that fear place. And he's still in transition around that, but is just, it's going so much more smoothly. Everybody's able to relax a bit more as they find, what is this next vision that they're going to come to around their organization. Now, he easily could have just stayed in his fear. He could have blamed his colleague. He could have, created a lot of drama between them. But, he so quickly shifted that they got to get into, creative thinking about it instead.
Yeah. And as you talk about it, I think leaders, and, I used to lead teams for over 20 years, basically, before I became an independent coach. So I got a lot of personal experience, shifting as I grew and as I, started learning more about myself, who I was as a person, obviously becoming more conscious as a person, as a leader. But as leaders, we very often, particularly, I want to say when we are younger, but that doesn't need to be necessarily the case. Like, we often don't realize what an impact we have on people around us, and how much we are being watched and copied. And we don't even need to be in the physical presence of the leader of the group, but that energy, just cascades down. And whether there is that energy of being below the line, when the leader is all over the place and blaming and being really reactive to whatever is coming at him or at her, or whether that energy is calming. And people, as I said, we don't need to be in the physical contact with that leader, but we just feel that energy cascading down the organization. And I think very often leaders, we do not really understand how much impact we have, even through like social media, as I'm talking about this now. If you see your boss posting something on social media, or, just being presented somewhere, the language that we use, how we, the presence that we display, how we show up, it all affects the people that we lead in the organization. So just, pausing on how impactful the leadership roles are. It doesn't matter whether you are a CEO or a manager, doesn't really matter, but yeah, just the impact is huge.
Yes, it is. And so like if I am working with a leader over time, I tell them, before you start to try to correct anybody or give anybody advice about where you think they're being or how they're being, just be the example. Just keep practicing all of the things that you are learning, and just let people learn from witnessing you, from watching you.
Yeah.
And that's often will teach people better than all of your words, because they start to, like you said, they feel it, they smell it, they can just, they can vibe it, something's different about this person, and they get curious, and then they'll often want to start asking questions. But I do want to say that just even on the other side of that, a lot of leaders do have this thought, like, I've got to be this presence. I've got to be this perfect leader. I've got to know what I'm doing at all times. I shouldn't be afraid. And so we like to really let people know, like, no, you can, you're always going to be growing. You're always going to be learning. I mean, I'm evolving all the time. And there's times when I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And I do get scared. And so I work with leaders, just to have that we're human. We're just in this human evolution. We're going to hit those places, especially as we keep leveling up. If you're going to level up, you're going to be in the unknown over and over. And so I like to say, to teach leaders to be able to say right in the middle of a meeting, like, gosh, I noticed right now as we're talking about this, I feel some fear, and not have that be a problem. It's no big deal.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Just being human, really. Basically, not to pretend, which, it's a progress for many people, and it's, a lot going into it, but it's such a beautiful work. So talking about it, so once again, I will just show the book again. So in the framework, you're talking about 15 commitments, and we will not go into all 15 in here. And we already touched on taking full responsibility, or radical responsibility, for how we show up. I love this book. People just go and buy it, seriously. But one that I would like to touch on, and maybe you can then bring one that you feel is very important, is talking candidly. We spoke about this before, and you said it was really important one among they are all important, but talking candidly, maybe we could touch base on that if you just could talk a little bit more about it.
Yes. So a lot of times, I'll work in a company where everybody's being careful and trying to be nice, and they end up in those holding back a lot of what they really think or feedback that they have for each other. And all under this guise of, well, we have to get along and we have to be this, and so what ends up happening when people don't have the skill to be direct and to be candid and to tell people what they think or what they want or whatever that is, and they don't do that directly, then the next step is people will start to gossip. And it's a very natural progression. And so people will talk behind each other's back, and maybe they'll start to backstab people. And this creates a culture of distrust. People start to, get afraid, right? Because if they're going to talk about, somebody else behind their back, well, they might be talking about you too. And if they're not going to tell them what they think, they're probably not going to tell you either. And that just sort of starts to breed this, a certain culture. Exactly. And so we have a lot of beautiful skills to be able to teach people what it is to be able to be direct. We have beautiful feedback skills. We teach people how to clear things up with each other. So if they do have some kind of a conflict with somebody that we've got like this little process called the clearing process. It's got 6 steps to it. And it's just this simple structure to actually be able to take responsibility for what it is you're thinking or feeling, the projection you might have towards that person, and be able to communicate that in an effective way so that you can get back into connection with them. So I just see candor as, it's, unless you were very lucky and were role modeled that growing up, which most people were not role modeled, how to be very candid and clear and, not blame, but also not hold back, then people don't know how to do it. And it is a learnable skill. It really, really is. You can learn it. And so many of all the commitments are learnable. It's not something that it doesn't matter how old you are or where you come from, they're learnable. And
and yeah, it is a skill and it is a practice, and that's the beautiful thing about it. And what I love about the book is that it's very practical. So
yes.
there's plenty of exercises. There is a very concrete, there are lots of examples from your clients. And as I said, practical exercises on how to go and obviously practice and how to introduce it to your life first, probably as a leader. And then just once you get into it, then start cascading down.
Yes.
Is there any commitment that you would like to touch base on?
Well, I think the commitment of integrity is such an important one, and we define it in such a clear way. It actually is a combination of 4 of our commitments. So the first, it's almost got like 4 pillars if you think of like holding up a building. So one is responsibility. So being willing to take responsibility and look at your part in anything. Another pillar is candor. So being able to, express and speak clearly and directly to the people you need to. Another is emotional intelligence. So being able to feel your feelings, allow them, not make them a problem, let them move all the way through you so that they don't build up and then blow up. And then the fourth is agreements, is around agreements and making sure that you're being very clear about what your agreements are, that you are getting that you have a clear understanding with somebody about what it is that's being expected of you or of them, either to do or to not do. And so we spend a considerable amount of time making sure that people have the skills to be able to really be in integrity so that things can run smoothly in their, in all the things that they're doing in their
Thank you for sharing. For me, the one that really resonated when I read the book, but also in my life previously and also with my clients, is the one called sourcing approval and holding control, because it's such a big thing. And this is where I believe, because so many of us are looking for the approval because of how we were brought up, our childhood memories, experiences, so on and so forth. And it's a lot of connection with fear. And it
Mhm.
leads us to seeking that approval just because I want to be a good employee, I want to be a good boss, I want to be a good girl, I want to be a good boy. And that kind of sourcing the approval can very quickly lead us to be below the line. And then we get into that kind of being close, being defensive, always trying to be right. And I see this over and over and over with my clients. And it's not that we want to do it. It's not that we are seeking, consciously very often. It's very subconscious very often. We want to be in control because we are scared, obviously. There is a fear that is driving us. But once again, this is a big one for my clients very often. And once they start seeing those patterns, once they, the conscious kind of realization comes into play, it's like the new door opens into, oh my God, what are those patterns? And I've been going on like this for the last 40 years, very often. So that is a really big one. What do you say about that one?
Yeah, I think it is we kind of have the commitments written in an order of progression on purpose. Because the first 6 or so commitments are really the foundational pieces, and so until people really have those very established and they've been practicing those for a while, I don't generally go up above, to the higher numbers and the practices. But sourcing security, control, and approval is a very powerful one. And so what you're talking about is, instead of sourcing it externally, that we source it internally, and we become the source for our own sense of approval. And for many people, that is the work of a lifetime, just continue working on that. It's not something that, you fully arrive at. But you can start to recognize when you're wanting approval from somebody, or when you're wanting to be in control, or when you're wanting, there's some way you're feeling insecure or not safe. And these are the 3 core needs. We all want security. We all want to feel, safe and secure. We all want to be approved of, to be appreciated, to be recognized and seen. It's an important need. And we all want, to some degree, to be in control of our lives. So when something happens to us, like some situation arises, at least one of those will almost always be triggered. And so one of the ways we can start to work with that is just to ask ourselves, okay, right now, which of these 3 needs is the most triggered for me? Is it around my approval? Is it around my sense of safety? Or is it around my sense of I'm not in control? And even when people can recognize, like, oh, I really want to be approved of, that's what is really up for me right now, just having the awareness of that, again, helps us to relax. Like, just because now we know that we're maybe doing something to get something from somebody. Right. And so we're aware of our agenda, and that already starts to change things. We can go deeper into that process, but that is a good starting point, is just to ask the question, which one of these things is the most? And then what we do is we say, can you accept yourself? Can you accept yourself that you want approval from another person or from a whole group of people? Can that be okay? Can you bring some compassion to yourself that that's one of the needs that you have right now that is feeling, is feeling brought up in you? And so acceptance is a really important part of growth and awareness, because if you can't accept that you're feeling insecure, you can't accept that you want to be in control, then you're going to be stuck there. Right. So just having even a couple of moments where you can go, okay, it's all right. It's okay that I'm scared. It's okay that I want approval from these people. It's totally normal that I do. And we take one breath of doing that already starts to shift us back over to ourselves, right? So now we're starting to source again over here.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful, Grace. Thank you very much for those explanations and clarifications. So I'll ask you, so can you tell our clients, how do you work? Is it one-on-ones? I know that you do all sorts of stuff and the ways how you work with clients. So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think my primary focus at this time is that I do work with groups. So I'll either work with groups of leaders in what we call a forum, and I work with them over a period of a year. So that will be like a very comprehensive, in-depth. That's for people who really, really are ready to like jump in the deep end and really do some deep work on themselves. I also work in organizations with teams, with leadership teams at first, and then sometimes we do culture programs. We do what we call a conscious culture program. That's 6 months to start, and we'll work every month with the team and teach them these skills and, work with them. So that's my primary focus. I do a little one-on-one still these days, but not much as much anymore. And if I do one-on-ones, it's usually those people who I'm working with already in the group settings.
Yeah. And you have got your first retreat at your home next week.
Yes. I did. I just moved here 6 months ago to North Carolina in the States, and I am having a first conscious leadership retreat out here next week on the farm. So it's
wish
exciting.
I was there.
I wish you were too. Yeah.
Congratulations on that. So
Thank
it's very,
you.
very exciting. I'm sure it's going to be great. So congratulations on all the work that you do. Thank you so very much once again for your time today. Is there anything else that you would like to leave our audience with? Any closing note or anything that you still would like to say?
Well, I thank you for even bringing this out and sharing it with your people, so that they can have exposure to this work. I felt like, back, 20 some years ago, I was really searching for a lot of the tools that we're now teaching people, and I just couldn't find anybody who would teach me those things. And so I just feel grateful that we now have that. We've kind of articulated in a way that I think, like you said, it's practical and it's applicable. It's not just a bunch of concepts. There's a lot of real practical wisdom and exercises on how to do it. So I think for people, if they're interested in anything we've talked about, getting the book is a really great starting point. People could start a book club. On our website, we have so many resources. We are very open source on our website, which is conscious.is. And people can go there to even find some of the handouts that we have for the exercises. And we do have like a format for people to have a book club if they wanted to start that way. And lots of half-day quick workshops that people can also just have an experience. Yeah, that's a great starting point.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on all the work, and thank you very much for all that work, because it's just, particularly I find it in today's world when we are going through such a huge transition and transformation, and there is just so much coming at us, at work, obviously at home, economically, climate wise, just huge transition, that need for being self-aware and understanding how do we function, who we are, kind of taking that control and looking inward so that we can support others, support ourselves and support others, and just bring calmness instead of chaos to our circles, whatever small or big, but each individual at the moment really, really matters right now. So thank you so very much for all that work that you do, Grace.
Thank you, Michaela. Thank you for having me.
Speak to you soon. Bye.